guys, welcome to Overcrest. I'm Kris.
And I'm Jake.
And we have a very special guest all the way from Iran, Kash Rabanyan. Am I doing that right? Is that right? That was good?
Yeah,
that was
perfect.
Good?
Thank you.
All right. Yes. First try. First try. Oh, acceptable. All right. And he's here to help us out with a very special story that Jake has put together.
I started putting together a really crazy, cool history story that happened to take place in Iran. And I got to thinking that, we have loyal listener, Kash. So I thought we better have him on, if for no other reason at all, just to make fun of me and correct me on my pronunciations. Because I know
you've already screwed up, Jake.
Okay.
It's Iran. Not Iran. Iran is something you do
I didn't
when
say
you're...
Iran. Didn't I say Ron? No,
It's one a mishmash of both of them. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's perfect. Where east meets west. It's just perfect right there. I think, Kris, I'll just say that, as we've seen in many of these stories, innovation really is what I like to focus on and is find so interesting. And often it stems from necessity.
Almost always.
Unfortunately, there's really no more dire necessity than in, the turmoil and the crucible of war.
Yes. And I was going to say nobody gets rich on shit people don't need or they don't think that they need. So
exactly. Yeah. And, as such, we've seen some of the craziest ideas have come from wartime, from, super glue was out of, U.S. war, to pigeon guided missiles, which I think I'm going to have to look into later because I didn't know that was actually a thing, but it was.
What is that? Just like, is that like duct tape with a missile on a pigeon?
No, it was so in World War II, they had like a screen and they would have a pigeon that was trained to like peck at the target. And so the pigeon was in the missile, Kris. Again, this is a whole separate story. This is not even what we're talking about.
Wait, so hold on.
There's a pigeon in a missile, Kris. That's all you need to know.
And it's like time for FPV.
Yeah. All right, I'll let it go. I'm really struggling to let that one go.
I know. You'll have to remind me later because there's a video of a pigeon like touching a screen. And then it's just because,
I'll let
the
it go.
Pigeon doesn't make it out of said missile. But anyways, I do want to interject here right away because we're already speaking about history. And Kris, did you know that Nokian Tires literally invented the winter tire? And this year they're celebrating their 90th anniversary of the invention. Now, Kash, I don't think you need winter tires in Iran.
Yes, we do actually. There is 3 ski resorts around Tehran.
Oh, there. I suppose it's all mountainous region. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, their flagship Hakkapeliitta tires are engineered with cutting-edge technology, honed on the world's toughest test tracks north of the Arctic Circle in the most extreme conditions. They have the durability and ruggedness, come with a pothole protection warranty, armored sidewalls we've talked about, and they have 30-day satisfaction guarantees. Learn more and find yourself a studded or non-studded winter tires at nokiantires.com. All right, I'm gonna fast forward history a little bit here. So let's get to World War II. Interestingly, Iran declared neutrality during the war, much like a Middle Eastern Switzerland, if you will, right? And even though Iran didn't want to necessarily get involved, the Allied countries during the war, they feared that they couldn't risk losing access to the oil and this entire supply chain, having it fall to the Nazis.
Who was Jake? Who was getting most of the oil? Was it the Allies or the Axis powers had access to that oil?
That's probably a question for Kash, but it's my understanding that the Allies were the ones that had access to Iranian oil supplies at the time.
There was a company called Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which emerged to become British Petroleum. Yeah.
But again, they were concerned, saying, well, we can't have this fall to the Nazis. So here's what's probably going to be interesting, Kash, because from the research I've done, the perspective is that the Allies did try to make diplomatic efforts to align Iran and, have us help with protection of the borders, but there was refusal to allow the territory for Soviet supply chains, and it kind of made conflict inevitable from the perspective that I read about. So British and Soviet forces did invade the country of Iran, securing control over the oil supply, and also, more importantly, there was a critical trans-Iranian railway. So basically, not only the oil supply itself, but the literal corridor to get it to the front lines. The existing leader, Reza Shah, was deposed and exiled by the British. So he was the guy that basically was like, no, we don't want you here. Well, it turns out his son, Muhammad Reza Pahlavi, was the new leader of the country then, right? So they're like, all right, we're going to get the old guy out because he didn't want to go and play ball with us. So we're going to be the son.
This sounds very familiar to a lot of... this has a lot of threads and associations with the way that things are done today.
It does. So Muhammad, he was supported by the Allies as he was young. He was only 22 years old at the time. And he obviously didn't have experience running a country. And so he was thought to be, at least from the Allied perspective, more easily persuaded into kind of the interest of the Allies and how we wanted to manage all these assets. So you have an independent state now led by a young, more or less inexperienced leader, and a power struggle emerges. In 1949, first of all, an assassination attempt to kill the Shah was attempted. And I do feel like it's worthwhile to clarify, just for my own understanding at the time. I didn't know what the title Shah really meant.
I was just going to ask, what's a Shah?
Yes, exactly. Shah is a shortened form of the old Persian term Shah an Shah, which directly translates to King of Kings.
Shah and Shah. Is this a religious title at all? Or is this purely a political title?
No, not at all. No. Just a quick history of the word. Actually, when Haqqani's used to conquer other nations around them, they didn't topple the government. So they kept the same Shah at the province, just added the province to their lands. That's why they call themselves Shah and Shah, King of Kings.
Because they kept the other kings within their own interest.
All the regular Shahs can be over here, and then we have the Shahs.
Peasant Shahs and Kings of Kings.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, okay, getting back to history, you have Shah, Muhammad Reza. He was emboldened by public sympathy for his injuries following this assassination attempt. Like, here's this young kid, he's trying to get shot at, and the public's like, oh, come on, guy. And he began to take a more increasingly assertive role in the country. Up until then, what I read said he wasn't super interested in it, right? He was kind of placed into power by the Allies, but he's like, I'm a 20-year-old, I'm doing my thing. He did, however, then amend the Constitution to increase his powers and appointed senators that were, of course, sympathetic to his own aims. However, one outspoken member of parliament, Mohammad Mossadegh, he thought this increase in the Shah's political power was obviously not democratic. He believed the Shah should, quote, reign but not rule, similar to constitutional monarchies like we see, in the UK. So led by Mossadegh, political parties and opponents of the Shah, they banded together to form a coalition known as the National Front. And this allowed Mossadegh to be elected as prime minister of Iran, essentially taking Shah his potential power, or what he wanted to control the government, away from him. And Mossadegh began to make pretty much sweeping reform in the country. While most of the democratic and progressive in nature, he was staunchly nationalistic. So he wanted to shun all foreign interest in the country. So Mossadegh seized the British Anglo-Iranian Oil Company's operation. Mossadegh was like, you know what? Nope, we don't want foreign influence.
What was the British response to this?
Oh, yeah, they didn't like that, Chris. Turns out it was a massive conflict. The confrontation between Iran and Britain escalated. Mossadegh's government refused to allow the British any involvement in their former enterprise, while Britain made sure Iran could not sell oil, which it considered stolen. So they put up giant blockades, and they basically said, embargoes for trade and everything else. But, because of all of this conflict and turmoil in 1952,
hold on, Jake. Let's put a perspective on that.
All right.
Okay, so think of post-World War II America.
Yep.
And you think of the insane growth that America saw in the 50s. Insane, right? Industrial expansion, population growth, cultural growth, just capital growth, economic growth. Massive. And the advent of everyone's got a car. Everyone's got a car. We're flying planes around. Industry's going crazy.
It's a reason it was the baby boomers, right? They were just
oil. We needed that oil because our economic, and we still do, obviously.
Yeah. And you realize you're foreshadowing like a lot here.
I
to
love
what
it.
I'm about to tell you next.
I love to foreshadow. Anyway, I just want to set the stage of why America is doing this.
Yes.
You know, if Iran has this oil, and we've already got via our ally, the British, we've already got our foot on the sand. They're absolutely going to do everything they can to leverage it. So
yeah. Also, what is the other big thing going on right now, Chris, in the 50s? The Red Scare.
Start of the Cold
Communism,
War. Yeah, the Cold
right?
War kicks off. Yeah.
And so if we don't have this huge asset to the Western world, which is oil, what if all this oil now goes to the communists? All of a sudden, communism spreads. So that's, at least from what I read, was some of the major fear and motivation for what comes next.
What is it from the Iranian perspective, Kash, at this time?
It was mainly the fight between Shah and Mossadegh because he wanted to go to the Russians, but Shah wanted to go to the Americans. That's why he actually asked for the coup, I think, to reduce his power and him become the monarch he was. And after he did that, he actually came to Americans and, for example, Jeep, an American motor company, came to Iran for franchising. GM came to Iran. The first foreign line of Cadillac were opened in Iran. They used to rename cars to Iranian names.
I'm just wondering if any cars were named Shah. Like, did we name any the Chevy? What is it?
Yeah.
Like, I was thinking like the Chevy Shah or the Cadillac Shah. That's what I would have named it.
No, we don't have that. Shah was a great patriot. He was not. He didn't want anything for himself.
I just mean just in general. Like if I was Cadillac, if I was Cadillac and I was going to sell a car over there, it would be the Cadillac Eldorado Shah of Shah edition.
Yeah,
that's what it would be. It would be the King of Kings Cadillac.
Maserati called that Shah.
Oh, do you?
See?
Okay.
See?
Yeah. Shah
Yeah. All right. Jake, go ahead. Sorry.
Yep. So, okay, I'm going to get us back on stage because I'm already confused, right? So it's post-war. They're cutting off ties with Britain and the world's oil supply. So what was put into place was known as Operation Ajax. It was a joint CIA and MI6 orchestrated coup to remove Prime Minister Moghazadeh and reinstate Mohammed Shah to power. Because
Ajax is an industrial cleaner, by the way.
Yes, it is. And also, I know I butchered a name right there. Kash.
Whenever you call Mossadegh, you call him something different.
All right. So while the coup was successful and the Shah was now in control of Iran, it planted deep seeds of resentment among the Iranian people. The Western influence in the coup was well known, and meddling of power was despised by many, as you can imagine. And throughout the next decade, the Shah launched an era known as the White Revolution. This was a series of reforms aimed at modernizing and westernizing Iran. These reforms included educational initiatives, women's suffrage efforts, and land reform. So through these land reformation measures, the Shah hoped to eliminate the influence of landlords and create a new base of support among kind of the peasant and working class. So it was meant to be a sort of like Iranian Robin Hood, Chris, right? You're taking the wealth and land from the rich and giving it out to the poor laboring class for them to farm for themselves. And now everyone's going to be happy and will love that the Shah did this.
This sounds like Soviet Russia.
I know, it's wealth distribution. Yeah, despite the best intentions, guess what? The plan completely backfired.
Oh, well, so no, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody wasn't happy that they were taking their land and just giving it away?
It wasn't even that they had the landholders were, the aristocrats were upset. Imagine massive swaths of land now lay in the hands of peasants without any really formal education or experience other than how to work the soil itself. Farming, it turns out, is more than just tilling a field. So the rich were obviously angry with the Shah for stripping them of the land, while the poor were upset for essentially being burdened them with the responsibility of managing land they had zero capability of. Okay. In theory, it made sense because now you have this entire class of people that are going to support the Shah, and it's a more distributed part of power, but
it's a harebrained scheme.
Didn't work. It made it very confusing too for land boundaries. Because all of a sudden it was a big spot of land and now it's all divided up. But it's too bad they didn't have, Kris, Onyx off-road back then, because then they would always know which public or private land boundaries you were on, and you'll know where you can legally camp and off-road, because they have over 750
or redistribute
miles.
wealth.
No, that's not what Onyx Off-Road does, but they do have over 750,000 miles of trails and comprehensive offline maps. You can explore.
They should have used Onyx in Iraq when they divided up between all the tribes there. Maybe the Sunnis and the Shiites would have had an easier time
we're not
getting
even
along.
getting into that, Kris. We're not getting there. No. But Onyx comprehensive offline maps. So even if you are in the middle of nowhere, many places I'm sure don't have cell service out there. Guess what? You can still explore without worrying about any data and that. The app features trail ratings, detailed information, and a discover tool to help you find trails near you. Plan trips with ease using the route builder and share your adventures with friends. Start your next adventure with confidence. Try Onyx Off-Road free for 7 days. Download it now and start exploring. Okay. So overnight, resentment increased towards the Shah. The view amongst the people was that his regime was kind of propped up by Western powers. And Kash, maybe you can correct me, because you said he was beloved, but I read a lot about his lavish lifestyle and how that kind of flew in the face of really a big poverty-stricken base, right?
Yes and no. Oh, his main point of spending money was cars. He had a lot of cars.
Yeah.
He had cars made for him.
Tell me more.
For example, he had a Lamborghini Miura SVJ modified for him with studded tires, because he had a villa in San Moritz, Switzerland, and he wanted to drive his Lamborghini to the top of the ski resort.
Wow, this is fantastic.
Wow. So that's the actual car. That's crazy. Yeah. I love that he had studded tires put on his Miura. He also was a pilot and had like a bunch of planes in his collection as well, by the way. But regardless, the religious fundamentalists within the government, they didn't like that. And they did start to gain favor because the populace also didn't like his white reform. So Ayatollah Khomeini, exiled in the 1960s for his opposition to the Shah, became a figurehead for the movement. His fiery sermons, smuggled in on cassette tapes at the time, called for overthrow of the monarchy. And with that, Kris,
you ever notice, Jake?
Revolution was at hand. All right,
okay,
now you can talk.
Perfect. Revolution is at hand. You know what sucks? Or this actually, it doesn't suck, but it's also great at the same time. You can't make a modern movie anymore interesting with modern technology. All good movies start before cell phones. When you can
smuggle. Yeah.
You need to smuggle cassette tapes. Now you can just put it on a thumb drive and encrypt it, or you can send it over Discord, or you can go on. There's dudes that would go on like Xbox, and they would use. Have you ever seen the thing where it plays like a noise and then it shows up on a screen? You ever seen that? It's like I forget,
like the waveform.
No. It's a sound file that is played. I don't remember the name of it, but it's a sound file that is played, and the sounds that it makes, it draws the code line by line, and it fills in the image line by line by line. And people would go on Xbox Live and they would play the sound. Then at the other end, there would be a little computer that would listen, and as it listened, it would draw the picture on the screen. That's about as good as it gets these days. Back in NATO, having to smuggle cassette tapes, man. All good movies happen before cell phones, for sure.
So this is now January 1979, and the Shah was forced to flee Iran. Khomeini returned from exile to a hero's welcome, and the Islamic Republic of Iran was born. According to this new theocratic regime, Shah's corruption was blamed on his alignment with the U.S. and this evil Western ideals. America, it was said, was the great Satan. So things have changed. Yes.
Meanwhile, all of that, he was driven from airport to Tehran on a K5 Blazer.
In a Blazer! I like that.
And the Blazer was owned by US Embassy.
Oh, that's kind of a funny little anecdote. So later that year, in October of 1979, the now exiled Shah was suffering from cancer. And he was admitted to the United States for medical treatment. Well, this act added insult to injury, and served to prove that their previous ruler was, in fact, nothing more than a pawn, Kris, under the care of the United States. And protests.
That's very surprising.
Protests formed throughout the country. The organizers, calling themselves the Muslim Student Followers of Iman's Line, had formed a plan to break into the embassy, and it was going to be a peaceful, symbolic sit-in. They just wanted to break in and have a sit-in. They're students, Kris. They're nonviolent.
Yeah. This must be
However,
the late 50s, early 60s at this point when that was involved.
It's 79, but yes.
Okay.
By 6:30 a.m., 300 to 500 protesters were gathered, and the crowd continued to grow. Shortly after, the crowd broke through the gates, blindfolded the Marines and embassy staff, and paraded them in front of photographers. So you've probably seen the movie Argo with Ben Affleck, which followed the rescue of 6 diplomats who escaped the embassy and were hidden by the Canadian ambassador. While 6 of those diplomats escaped, the majority of them in Tehran did not. This became known as the Iranian hostage crisis. The hostage takers accused the U.S. of plotting another coup to reinstall the Shah, which, sidebar, you can kind of see why they might be suspicious of that, since, we did just that like 20 or 30 years prior. The crisis dragged on for days, then weeks, and then months. And the hostages became pawns in a geopolitical chess game, and the pressure to bring them home mounted. By 1980, Carter finally took military action and approved what was called Operation Eagle Claw. This was an ambitious plan and required the cooperation of 4 branches of the U.S. military: the Army, Navy, Marines, and the Air Force. And the concept was based on an operation where helicopters and C-130 aircraft, following different routes, would rendezvous on a salt flat codenamed Desert 1, 200 miles southeast of Tehran. Here, the helicopters would need to refuel from the C-130s and pick up a whole fleet of Delta Force and Ranger troops. The helicopters would then transport the troops to a mountain location codenamed Desert 2 outside of Tehran. CIA officers, who were already inside Iran, would rendezvous at Desert 2 with trucks, and together, the CIA officers with ground force would then drive to Desert 2 into Tehran. So this is a very complex, as you can see, operation, Kris.
Mm-hmm.
The team would then assault the embassy and the building, eliminating the guards, and rescue the hostages, with air support from the Air Force A-130 gunships flying over from Desert 1. The hostages and rescue team would then rendezvous with the helicopters from Desert 2 at the, this is where Kash needs to help me, the Ajamadiya Stadium.
Amjadiya
Stadium, where the hostages and rescue teams would board helicopters. As I said, the plan was ambitious, sophisticated, and very complex. Just before midnight...
Honestly, I'll tell you right now, just from hearing you say that, it doesn't sound like a good idea.
There's too many moving parts.
Too many moving parts.
Yes, but the biggest issue was they're being held in the middle of the city, right? At this time, they're still being held in the embassy. How do you get them out? It would take too big of a force. You can't bring them in by truck. I get into a little bit of their thinking later, but I'll just tell you how Operation Eagle Claw kind of progressed. So just before midnight, the first crews landed and began securing the first desert rendezvous when Rangers observed a fuel tanker truck, ignoring their orders to halt, bearing down on them. The Rangers, needing this person to not come across in China like C-130s and U.S. forces, fired on the truck with an RPG, and the truck erupted into a massive fireball, illuminating the nighttime sky for miles around. Meanwhile, the truck's passenger was killed. The driver did manage to escape in an accompanying truck, which presented a huge security risk, right? So if that weren't enough, the incoming helicopters were forced to make an emergency landing when a sensor indicated that a cracked rotor blade had happened. Another helicopter...
Can't be good.
No, definitely not. Another helicopter ran into a freak dust storm, a haboob, I believe it's called, right, Kash? Which disabled flight instruments. So the storm made it impossible.
Boobs are usually a good thing.
This isn't this time. So you have no instrumentation. So the helicopter has no instrumentation, right? And he can't fly it with visual reference because A, it's pitch black, and you're in the middle of a dust storm. So even with your night vision, you got nothing. He was forced to turn back. So the remaining helicopters reached Desert One more than an hour behind schedule. Without the full fleet of air support, they wouldn't be able to transport all the men for their infiltration team. And so rather than risking sending in a smaller force, the decision was made to abort. So already they're saying, all right, we're scrapping it, abort mission. However, the helicopters, they were now in the middle of the desert, still needed to refuel in order to make it back to the USS Nimitz aircraft carrier. Refueling took place directly behind the C-130s, which required the helicopters to hover into position. This is in the desert, in the dark. This part is important, Kris. This maneuver was assisted by a ground controller maintaining line of sight with the pilot, directing the craft into position. However, as the rotors churned up the desert sand, it blew the ground controller backward. The pilot, struggling to make out the man's instructions, could only see the figure moving back away from his position, and he assumed the helicopter was drifting backwards. He therefore attempted to correct the situation and applied forward stick. What resulted was a massive explosion as the helicopter's rotor struck the cargo plane's tail fin. There it is.
And the plane was moving fuel, I think. So that caused the explosion.
So it's a huge. The C-130 exploded as well as the one helicopter. 8 of the men were killed by the blast, and 2 others were severely burned. The next morning, Iranian forces investigated the scene, finding the wreckage, and were able to piece together the failed rescue plan. The mission was not only a huge failure, but was kind of an international humiliation, with Iran publicizing the incident. And Kash, maybe you can talk a little bit about, what was seen from that perspective.
And there is not a lot of data on our part on the operation, but what was quite major actually for clergymen who had just won the country was that they claimed that this crazy idea of like wind in God's agents, and it came to prevent you from attacking us.
Oh, yeah. It was divine intervention, basically, is what they had said.
Yeah.
So analysts at the Pentagon went to work because the U.S. needed a new plan, and they needed it now.
What was how was that presented? Is there any, how was that presented, on the news? How did Walter how did he?
I didn't actually look. Maybe you Google a little bit because I can keep talking, because it was on the international stage. It was an embarrassment for sure. The Pentagon decided, as you imagine, the next operation.
What would I look up, Jake? Is the news report on what was the mission called?
Operation Eagle Claw.
Okay, let me see what I can find.
What I know from the operation was that the day after this incident, actually, the United States broadcasted the news about the operation, and ultimately that was what led Jimmy Carter to lose the election. And Reagan
so we'll talk about that in a little bit here, but in the midst of all this, Kris, it's an election cycle back home.
Okay, I've got it here. Let me pull this up.
Okay.
The original, it's like an original news report. I don't know who this news guy is. What does it say?
Not Cronkite, huh?
It's not Walter Cronkite. No, it's I don't know. There's just some guy. Let's see what he says.
A U.S. effort to rescue the hostages in Iran was aborted by President Carter after an equipment failure forced a change in plans. 8 Americans were killed when 2 U.S. aircraft collided as the American volunteers were being pulled out of a remote area of the Iranian desert. We now know the rescue attempt was launched at about 5 p.m. our time, that the president made the decision to abort the mission at about 9 o'clock. The news broke at about 1 o'clock this morning, informing the nation that all the volunteers had been removed from the Iranian desert base, and that President Carter would make a statement on the abortive rescue attempt at 7 o'clock this morning. We have a portion of that address.
This rescue attempt had to await my judgment that the Iranian authorities could not or would not resolve this crisis on their own initiative. With the steady unraveling of authority in Iran and the mounting dangers that were posed to the safety of the hostages themselves, and the growing realization that their early release was highly unlikely, I made a decision to commence the rescue operations plans. This attempt became a necessity and a duty. The readiness of our team to undertake the rescue made it completely practicable. Accordingly, I made the decision to set our long-developed plans into operation. I ordered this rescue mission prepared in order to safeguard American lives, to protect America's national interest, and to reduce the tensions in the world.
In his statement, the President alluded to the first phase of the operation. Obviously, he did not detail what was to follow: the establishment of the base of operations in the remote desert town that lies about an hour and a half's flight time from Tehran, and, of course, the American embassy. There has been, of course, much reaction. 3 people that we were able to talk with and listen to: Senator Jacob Javits of New York and Senator John Glenn, both cautious in their appraisal. They urged our nation to be cool, the people to be cool, to watch and wait for the next few hours and days to see what the reaction, of course, would be in Iran and to their people. Ghutsbadeh, the foreign minister of Iran, said that they too were taking a reasoned approach. They, of course, regretted the American action, called it warlike and all of those kind of things, but he too took a conciliatory tone. And also in conversation with Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, the former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, he thought that the action taken by the President was a positive one. He thought that it was about time that we act with some decision and decisiveness. And he said it would prove to the Iranian people and to the neighboring Russians, of course, that we take this matter very seriously. And he thought that we ought not to apologize for the action that we have taken. That comment from former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. And to repeat for you now, the United States has launched an effort to rescue the hostages being held in the U.S. Embassy in Iran. That effort was aborted by what was described as an equipment failure by the President, as the volunteer force was being pulled out of the base in Iran, an Iranian desert town, Tabriz. A collision occurred between 2 American aircraft, resulting in the deaths of 8 Americans. We do now have on the phone William Worthy.
That's the end of it. Guess we don't get to hear from that guy.
Who's William?
But, who's William? That's it. That's the end of the clip. I have a question. This has been kind of, itching at my mind a little bit. What was the Iranian goal of having these hostages, Kash? Why were they there? Why were they held for so long? What was the goal of the hostages in the first place?
I don't know for certain. Maybe it was vengeance, revenge, something like that, or they wanted to get a leverage point to gain something from United States.
Yeah, I've never really been able to find a reason.
And another thing too, Shah died of cancer in 1980, and one of their goals was to trade those hostages with Shah.
Right. That was originally why the students claimed that they took the hostages, was they wanted to force the U.S. to release Shah out of our protection.
That's why Shah had to leave the United States.
Okay. Yeah. So after all of, the chaos that was Operation Eagle Claw and the fallout from it, we needed something simpler. We needed a new plan. We needed it now. And as we found, it needs to be much simpler logistically. And
we just needed Ronald Reagan.
Oh, interesting. Interesting that Reagan would be the solution here.
Mm-hmm.
So the biggest challenge was getting to the middle of the city where the hostages were being held in the embassy at this point, and being able to return safely. Ground transport was deemed too dangerous. With the large force needed to breach the stronghold of the embassy, a full-on convoy would be required, which wasn't exactly subtle. Helicopters simply wouldn't have the fuel range to get in and return home. And being located in the middle of the city, there wasn't anywhere to land a plane. Or was there? Enter Operation Credible Sport. The previously failed mission had planned to use a nearby soccer stadium as the extraction point for the helicopters. The stadium, while certainly not a full-on runway, could, in theory, serve as a location to land a small plane, one that had an extremely short takeoff requirements. Which, sidebar, Kris and Kash, I don't know if you've heard of this. Are you familiar with the aeronautical term STAL? That is to say, it's an acronym for short takeoff and landing. And there's actually national level competitions where guys take their modified bush planes meant to land in remote areas up in Alaska. And I highly recommend you check out some of these videos if you haven't, Kris. It's basically the same formula
I've
as
seen
in
them.
race cars.
That's
right?
it. That's in my algorithm, dude.
100%. Yeah. So as I'm relating it to like motorsport. It's the same formula, right? Like maximize horsepower, high powered engines in as light of a chassis as possible. We're talking massive turbocharged power plants.
Yeah, but how do you do that on C-130?
Well, hold on. I'm still talking about these stall aircraft because like they have full carbon fiber planes now. These guys can hold the brakes, throttle up power, and just use the airspeed of the prop to lift off the ground vertically, or zero rollout, as they call it. So back to our mission, the military decided they needed something larger than just a bush plane, right? So after all, we're talking about a sizable fighting force, not to mention over 50 hostages themselves. They required an actual cargo plane, a C-130. A C-130 that could land and take off inside a soccer stadium fully loaded. And so, in July of 1980, government officials quietly met with none other than Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works division to have them build just that. The engineering requirements were mind-boggling, you guys. A 150,000-pound airplane needed to land in a space of less than 600 feet and be able to quickly turn around and take off in the same distance while clearing the 90-foot-tall bleachers. Clearly, the aircraft needed more thrust than the existing 4 turboprops could provide. And what creates a ton of thrust in a small package, Chris? Rockets. That's right. It just so happens that the Lockheed Martin had access to rocket motors used in the RUR-5 anti-submarine missiles and AGM-45 radar-seeking missiles. Chris, it's really handy they had those parts on hand.
Yeah,
and I'm going to have
absolutely.
you pause that for a second, because speaking of parts on hand, did you know that our friends at FCP Euro have over 275,000 unique products on hand, including expert assembled kits?
Including rockets, just like on this.
Nope. I don't think they have the rockets that they took from missiles and attached into a C-130, but they do have OE, OEM, and genuine aftermarket performance parts for European car, including Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche. Working on expanding that at every turn. Every product they sell has, of course, their lifetime replacement guarantee, even wear items. They have their distribution center now in Mesa, Arizona, so they're shipping from both coasts, serving more of the country in 3 days or less with the free shipping option.
They should stock like a C-130 engine on their website at full retail.
Just for this, just for us.
Just to have it on there.
Just for us, okay.
I mean, if I had a parts company, that's what I would do. I would have parts.
That is why we don't have any money, Chris.
If I had a parts company, I would have like weird things on there that aren't like that you would just stumble across. Like I would have like a Boeing engine, or I would have like a crate Ferrari V12, or I would just have like
we would get the pricing wrong, and someone would make the actual purchase, and then we'd be forced to like source this somehow.
I would just 3D print one and send it to them.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Check out fcpeuro.com today and take advantage of free shopping on any order over $49. I do have a photo of the missile there, Chris, because
this is the missile that they bolted to the situation.
So these are solid fueled rockets, and they could each produce upwards of 20,000 pounds of thrust each. So naturally, the cowboys over at Skunk Works decided to try to bolt 30 of them to a C-130. Now, truth be told, rocket assisted takeoff, or RATO, as the acronym is, wasn't a new concept at the time. It's actually been used since World War II in various forms. Even so, nothing came close to what was designed and designated as the XFC-130H, or the C-130 Superstall. It had the rockets installed in 5 sets. 8 firing forward to stop the aircraft, 8 downward to break its descent rate, 8 rearward for takeoff assist, and 4 mounted on the wings to stabilize them during takeoff transition.
This is completely unreasonable.
It's so ridiculous. You can play that video again just for those that are tuning in, because it is absolutely amazing.
Which video? What do you want?
Nobody's
just tuning in. Everybody saw it. Nobody's just tuning in. This isn't like you turn on the radio and
today to see.
Overcrest doesn't just come on the radio and someone just tuned in.
Color.
No, you're an idiot.
Okay, so yeah, they had 30 rockets. They also had Additional fins mounted the fuselage to aid in stability, double slotted flaps and extendable airloins for additional slow speed lift, and a tail hook required to land aboard an aircraft carrier. They had full combat avionics and a full defense countermeasure suite, which aren't normally found on a cargo plane.
I've got some. I mean, I'm going through the stuff that Kash put together. Do you want some more pictures of the wreckage from the?
That's Operation Eagle Claw. I mean, we're past that.
I'll put them up in post.
Okay. I just want to keep watching this thing. So at the beginning of that first video, there's a slow motion clip of the props having these cool contrails in the like really humid air. It's a really cool shot. And I'll tell you about this thing as we pull that up. So the first fully modified C-130 Superstall
I don't know which video it is,
aircraft.
Jake. There's all kinds of videos here.
In my folder, there's one video.
There's one, Jake. No. Oh, this is the one I'm supposed to play here?
Yes.
This one?
Yes.
I don't know, dude. You sent me so much crap.
I sent you 4 files. It starts out black. It is actually playing. All right. So the first, look at that shot, dude.
Wow.
How awesome is that? The first of these aircraft was delivered on the 17th of October to a disused airfield located in the England Air Force Base range in Florida. Everything worked flawlessly during the initial tests, and on the 29th of October, a complete mission simulation was to be conducted by the Lockheed flight test crew. Before the flight, test engineers determined that the aircraft's onboard computer needed additional calibration to fully integrate the landing rocket firing sequence during the landing phase. However, rather than further delay the project, the Lockheed crew elected to fly the test manually, firing the rocket motors by hand. That morning, aircraft 74-
Did you just watch that, Jake?
It goes so fast.
Watch this thing take off.
I know, it just floats off the air. Watch, just boop. It's up.
I just wanted, this thing is at a dead standstill right now.
Yep,
it's not moving.
Ridiculous. Look at that. It's off. Yes. That's how they needed to get out of a soccer stadium. It's ridiculous. So, okay. The guys are going to manually fire the rockets. And you might see actually what happens in this clip. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves. But look at the retro rockets. How cool is that when they fire forward?
Well, that's how you got to land in the soccer stadium.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so they're firing it manually. And that morning, the aircraft set multiple stall records right away. Quote, the nose gear lifted 6 feet off the ground after 10 feet of takeoff roll. And the aircraft was airborne with 100 feet of brake release. Everything.
This doesn't look good,
I know.
Jake.
Hold on, Chris. Hold on. Everything continued to go as planned after takeoff, and the aircraft prepared for the rocket-assisted short-field landing.
From what I'm seeing on the screen now in your file, you're lying to me.
Yourself. I know. Well, actually, you can rewind, and I will basically narrate what's happening in real time.
Okay, let's do that.
All right, so we're preparing for the rocket-assisted short-field landing.
Yes.
And when the upper deceleration rockets fired at approximately 20 feet of altitude, the aircraft obviously slowed rapidly, like it was meant to. The flight engineer, however, was blinded by the forward rocket blast in front of the cockpit and thought the aircraft was already on the runway and manually fired the remaining lower rocket. However, the downward set of rockets designed to slow the plane's descent and soften the landing had not fired. So the plane fell 20 feet to the runway straight down like a rock. The resulting shock caused the right wing to break off on impact within the runway, rupturing the fuel tank within it. The rocket's exhaust, still firing, then ignited the exposed fuel, creating
there goes the front ones I'm watching right now.
Fireball. Boom! Just literally dropped out of the sky.
And the airframe just couldn't handle.
Yep.
It couldn't handle the stress.
That ruptures the fuel tank, and the cameraman isn't obviously doing his
job.
job
the cameraman's
here.
like, "Oh my god!" It's like every cameraman it's like every cameraman with his phone. Where you're like, dude, what are you doing? Don't you understand your job?
So here we have the fuel going out and gets ignited by the rockets that are still firing. And there is...
Can you imagine being in this plane right now? Just be like, dude, we got to get out of here.
Yeah, so luckily, safety crews were standing by, and the fire was extinguished within just 8 seconds of it coming to an actual stop. The crew made it out alive. And in the interest of expediency, I love this. The Air Force buried the plane at the test site Because remember, this is secret, but we don't want to spend time getting rid of it. So literally just get out the digger and let's bury this thing, and ordered the rockets to be placed on a backup C-130 so that we could just go back up again and try it again. Like, just keep testing.
Yeah,
so,
no OSHA here in this period of time.
Even as the engineers worked to perfect the design, diplomacy took an unexpected turn. In January 1981, after 444 days, the hostages were released as part of a deal brokered during Ronald Reagan's presidential transition. Operation Credible Sport, while impressive, was no longer needed. Even though the rocket-powered behemoth never had the chance to serve its singular purpose, Operation Credible Sport was never considered a waste or a failure. Quote, "This shows just what we're capable of when we're under pressure," said Larry Layfield, one of the U.S. Air Force contractors involved in the project. Its innovation paved the way for modern special ops capabilities, providing that even wild ideas can have lasting value. Of the 3 C-130
Alternatively,
Superstalls,
they should have just thrown Jimmy Carter out and it would have been solved immediately. Sounds like it's
we're going to get to this because
okay.
Uranium
there's
would
more to
agree.
it
Because
than that. There's what do you say? So there was 3 of these C-130s
it's
built.
been said that. Oh, sorry, I didn't want to
Go ahead,
interrupt
Kash.
you.
No, you're good.
No,
Yeah,
go
it's
ahead.
been said that it was Jimmy Carter's fault that Shah left, and this happened. This thing that we are experiencing now in Iraq.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I'll get into the conspiracy because we all love a good conspiracy, Chris, in a minute here.
Yes.
But I was curious what happened to these planes. So there was 3 of them built by Lockheed. One was obviously destroyed during testing. The second was actually demodified and returned to normal C-130 service.
These C-130s are too valuable to just have it sit around with a bunch of rocket engines on it.
Well,
hoping
no, that's not true, because the third one, Chris, they kept as such, kept testing with it, and then it actually just was retired. It's currently at the Empire State Aerospace Museum in Gainesville, New York. Like it exists. You can just go see it.
I need to see this thing.
Yes. It is very cool and would be very surprising to see. You know what else is surprising before we continue? Is Petrobox. Every month you get a surprise right there on your doorstep. They carefully select items, including tools, detailing supplies, apparel, garage gear, stickers, publications to be sent right there. It's a great gift for the holiday gift-giving season, I will tell you. And there are 2 different levels of subscription to choose from. Petrobox Basic costs less than $20 a month, while the Petrobox Premium gets you more than a gear for $39.95 a month. Check them out at mypetrolbox.com and be sure to use the code Overcrest at checkout. Okay, so as for the hostages, the signing of the Algiers Accord guaranteed the release, providing that the U.S. government not intervene in future Iranian affairs. The actual transfer of the prisoners to U.S. custody happened to take place exactly as Ronald Reagan was being sworn in and giving his inaugural address. There are many theories alleging that Reagan's presidential campaign had conspired with Iran to delay the release until after the 1980 election in order to thwart the Carter administration's re-election and success. The events surrounding the hostage crisis and the rescue attempts did have long-standing effects, regardless of whether that rumor is true. The Iraqi
I don't think it's legal for the president to engage in foreign policy until he's elected.
No, it was kind of proven later that wasn't true, but there was a lot of weird things that everyone's like, wait a minute, how did he do this? Where he basically had them hold out until literally he's giving an inauguration speech and he gets to say, and as we speak, 52 Americans are boarding this plane and I smell hippies, is probably what he said during his inauguration. I assume that's exactly what he said. Yeah, it's unfortunate the Iraqi invasion of Iran occurred less than a year after the embassy employees were taken hostage. A lot of people say that these are all dominoes that kind of just led to a lot of these later, conflicts. Many argue the dramatic change in American-Iranian relations from allies to enemies helped embolden the Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein then. And the United States' anger with Iran, meanwhile, led to the support and military aid of Iraqis, deepening the anti-American feeling in Iran. Tensions and war have continued, of course, basically until this day. regardless, looking back at Operation Incredible Sport, I'd like to just say that it stands as a testament to human ingenuity and ambition and how people can come together and create the most crazy of ideas and solutions, even in some of the darkest times.
I love that plan. I like it. I'm trying to find.
Let's just put 30 rockets and strap them to a C-130. But the video is the best part. Like, did you see how quickly that thing took off?
It was almost instantaneous.
They usually take something like, oh God, what was it? It was like 3,500 feet of runway to take off. And they're like, yep, 10 feet. There we go. Let's do it, guys. So absolutely crazy story. Of course, a ton of background information I wanted to get into with Iran with help of Kash here to kind of set the stage for why this was even necessary. But it all, as it always does with a lot of my history stories and deep dives where you fall down a rabbit hole, I just saw that video of this C-130 taking off with rockets. I'm like, what?
Well, many thanks to Kash for coming to hang out with us. It's cool to see him. He's an active member of our Discord. If you want to come hang out and ask him about Iran or anything like that, or just come hang out and chat with everybody in the Discord, I'll put the link in the show notes. You can come hang out.
Absolutely, you should. All right. With that, Kris, we will see everyone next week, I believe, with something.
Yeah, I have no idea what's going on. I got to figure out, but maybe some news, maybe some. I think I have an interview for you guys that has a lot to do with some exploration by a very prolific automotive explorer.
Ooh, I like that.
I'll just tease it with that. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. We will see you guys next week.
Take care.